Hi, students. It's Dr. Marks, and our topic for today is privatizing Social Security. Now, before we just jump right into it, you probably are already aware that Social Security has a fiscal problem, right? We do not have enough money to sustain Social Security given our current level of taxes and the benefits that we have to pay out. And so people have been calling for reforms. And one question a lot of people have is, can we end Social Security? And the answer is no. We can't. We can't just say, hey, guys, we've changed our mind. We're moving away from this. Because we cannot abruptly end Social Security. If we want to do something with a major reform that will lead to the end of Social Security, it's going to have to be more of a long-term phase out. And the reason it has to be more of a long-term type of phase out, and by long-term I mean over many decades, we have to do it over a very long period of time because of that pay-as-you-go method that we use, right? The pay-as-you-go design makes it really difficult for us to have a major reform like ending Social Security as we know it now. And the reason for this is that money is owed to people, and it's owed to people well into the future, right? We have money that we have to pay in the form of future benefits, for example, to people like me. Think about my case. I started working full-time when I was 26 years old, and I've been paying in now for 3 decades as I record this, and even more than 3 decades. A lot of money is owed to me, and I'm not going to be eligible for benefits until I'm 67. So think about that. I started paying into the Social Security system full-time, at least, when I was 26. I've been paying for decades. I've been accruing these benefits. Think about all the money I've paid in over years and years and years. And I'm not eligible to get full benefits till I'm 67. So the question is, who is going to pay me if we end Social Security, right? Well, I'm due benefits, and you can't just say, just kidding, we're not going to pay you benefits that you've accrued over your lifetime. And keep in mind, there's a lot of people like me, your parents, your grandparents. What are we going to do? We can't just stop paying them, right? So therein lies the biggest problem. We have a liability that goes far into the future. And by liability, I'm talking about money that we owe to people. So we have a liability. It's kind of like having a debt, right? But we have no savings account to pay this. It's not like there's some huge pot of money that we can say, oh, don't worry about it. We've got this big bank account. We'll use that to pay all these people that we owe long into the future. It doesn't exist. And so for this reason, we call this an unfunded liability, right? It's unfunded because the funds aren't sitting there to pay it, and it's a liability because we owe people money far into the future. And it turns out this unfunded liability is really, really large, folks. If you look at the 2023 Social Security Administration report, they tell us that this unfunded liability, as of right now, in 2023 is $78 trillion. Now, that's a huge number, $78 trillion, right? But to put it in perspective, $78 trillion is more than 3 times the gross domestic product of our country from last year in 2022, as I record this. So think about it, guys. Remember, gross domestic product is the value of all final goods and services. So it kind of represents the size of our economy. Our future unfunded liability of $78 trillion is more than 3 times the size of the U.S. economy. So if that doesn't scare you, don't know what will. But we owe a lot of money. We cannot renege on it. There are proposals for privatizing. So privatizing is not the same as ending Social Security. Let me be clear. Privatizing means that we're going to rely on the private sector. Think about the stock market. That's private. Think about the retirement account you might have with a company. That's private. So we're talking about the idea of privatizing Social Security, but not getting rid of it altogether. And other countries have done this. In Chile is one example of a case study that I've read. But the idea here when we talk about privatizing is that it would allow young people to put money into private retirement accounts. Now, think about that for just a second and all you've learned about Social Security. Wouldn't you like all of that money, or at least some of that money that they're taking out of your accounts, to be able to go into a private retirement account, like in the stock market? So let's talk about why this might be a good idea. And it is, in some respects, a really good idea. And at the top of the list for why privatizing in this way and letting young people put money into the private retirement accounts instead of Social Security, why it's a good idea? Well, at the top of the list is that the rate of return is better. I know in class we've talked about the rate of return for Social Security, and we know it's not going to be very good, right? It just kind of barely beats inflation. But the stock market can give you better rates of return, and that means your money is going to grow faster, right? If I have $100 that has been earmarked for me in Social Security, and that earns 1% after inflation, well, the stock market on average is going to do way better than that. And so it's a way for money to grow faster, for investments to get higher yields. But a second reason that this could be a good idea, is that it gives you more control over your investments. Well, you're going to have to manage the accounts. You can decide how risk averse you are or not. So you'll have more control over your investments. And then the third reason that this is a good idea is simply because Social Security is insecure. And we've talked about that in class. You don't know that there's going to be a whole lot available for you when you retire, especially if we have to talk about raising taxes and cutting benefits. By the time we do that, there's not going to be a lot left for you guys. So as a young person, you should be saying, yay, privatization, that sounds like a pretty good idea. Sounds like a pretty good idea. It's certainly going to give you more flexibility, and it should result in a better rate of return for you. Unfortunately, it's just not that simple. If it was that simple and we could just end Social Security and privatize it and let people privately save, that would be great. But it's not that simple, because you're still going to need to pay some Social Security tax. Understand that when we talk about privatization, you are not going to get out of the burden of having to pay some Social Security taxes. The trade-off is you're going to get to put some of the money that you're forced to take out of your check, you'll get to put some of this money into private accounts. So it's a bit of a trade-off. We still need you to pay Social Security taxes, but we're going to let you put some of that money into private accounts where it will do better for you. So that's the upside. And you might be thinking, yikes, wait, well, if I'm saving privately, I don't want to still pay Social Security taxes. Well, you're going to have to. And again, think about why. You've got that unfunded liability to people like me, people like your parents, your grandparents, and we want our benefits. And somebody has to pay it. Who has to pay it? Today's workers, right? So if you're older, like my age, you probably want to stay in the current system. As I record this, maybe I've only got 10 or 11 years until retirement. So for me, this isn't going to do a whole lot. I want to stay in the current system. I know what they're estimating my benefits will be. It's not great, but I'm okay with it. But if you're younger, like you guys, the thing is that this is going to make you better off in the long run. You might not like the idea you're having to pay Social Security taxes, and I understand why. And you understand why you can't stop paying, right? That unfunded liability. But the trade-off, again, remember, is you get to take some of the money and put it into private accounts, which have a better rate of return. So in the long run, you are better off. You're going to fare better for retirement under this type of plan than relying on Social Security. Again, privatization looks more like this. So this is you, the happy graduate. And notice that you're still paying money to retirees today, right? That yellow circle. But you're also getting to put some of this 7.65% into private investments, which have a higher rate of return. So imagine a world where let's say, just for sake of argument, you still pay 7.65% in tax. That is taken out of your check. Some of it goes to retirees today. Some of it goes to your private investment account. You're still going to be better off than if you just have everything in the Social Security system. So that's what I'm arguing here. That's kind of the idea behind privatization and what makes it attractive. Now, at the heart of the matter is that we need to get this unfunded liability down. So think about what I'm saying. We have this $78 trillion unfunded liability that goes way into the future. Well, I can't privatize and free up money for you to retire, to put money into your own retirement accounts and pay $78 trillion, right, in future liabilities. So we need to shrink that. We need to make it less than $78 trillion. And so there are some ideas on how you do that through a privatization type of model. If we can get the unfunded liability down, so it's not $78 trillion, then maybe we can support both systems. You can put some money towards private retirement, but I can still get those Social Security benefits that I have earned, that I've paid into, that I've accrued over time. And so we can do this in the way that a private system is set up. So I'm going to show you an example, and I want you to be very clear. This is not a proposal that's on the table. This is only for illustrative purposes, and it's also overly simplified. But I'm trying to give you the idea of how do we free up flexibility for young people like you, but take care of older people like me, but get the unfunded liability down so that we can do both at the same time. So again, my overly simplified example will help you understand this. All right, so let's say, for sake of argument and just for simplicity, that I'm dividing the world into people under 30, people from 30 to 52, and then people over 52. Most likely, we're going to take the youngest people, and again, I'm just making up the ages, but we're going to have them forced out of the Social Security system, and we're going to force them into private retirement. So understand what I mean. Are you still paying taxes? Yes, you are, because remember that pay-as-you-go system. But when I say forced out of the Social Security system, that means you're not going to get any Social Security benefits like I'm getting. But instead, as the second bullet explains, you're going to be forced into the private system. So you're going to pay some Social Security taxes, but some of your money is going to go into this private retirement account system. And as the third bullet says, you're going to retain no benefits from the public system. So a young person like you, you're still going to pay some taxes for Social Security because you have to pay people like me, and it's a pay-as-you-go system. But in return, you will get no Social Security benefits, but you get to create these private accounts, and these private accounts will grow faster because the rate of return is better on investments in the private marketplace like the stock market. All right, so you should be saying, yay, I will take that trade-off. I'll still pay some tax as long as you let me put a part of it into the private retirement. So that's going to be young people like you guys. But then we move into this kind of middle group. Maybe it's going to be 5 different groups. I don't know. This is just for illustration purposes. But the people in the middle are going to be given the option to opt out. Now, if you're 35 or 40, this probably is a good deal for you. You're going to opt out. And what that means is, as the second bullet explains, your benefits are reduced. But third, you get to put some money into the private retirement system, just like the young people, and you're going to get a better rate of return. So before we look at the example, do you understand what I'm saying? You're going to get the choice. If you opt out of the Social Security system fully, then what we're saying is you're going to get less benefits. We're not going to take them all away. From here on in, you're going to get to start saving privately. You're going to get a rate of return that's going to probably make you better off in the long run. So as the example says, you move to this private system, but not fully. You get to create private accounts that have a better rate of return. And let's say, for example, you have to forego 50% of the benefits you've accrued, and you're not going to accrue any more. So you have to decide, is giving up 50% of the benefits you have accrued in exchange for, going forward, being able to take part of the taxes you pay and put them into a private retirement account. Will that make you better off or not? If you're 35, it's probably going to make you better off. If you're 52, then maybe not. So you get the idea. The younger you start this, the better off you're going to be if you go to the private system, because you're not losing as much benefits, but you get to invest privately for a longer time. Then we have the people that are over 52. And again, I'm just making up these ages. And we would probably say, look, you're going to just remain on the current system. So be very clear. Let's look at it all together. On the left, the youngest people are just forced out. You still have to pay some Social Security taxes to support others, but you get into the private system. You don't retain any benefits from the public system. So even if you've worked for 5 years, you don't accrue any of it. You give it all up. In exchange, we start diverting some of the money you're paying from your paycheck in the Social Security taxes, and we put it into private accounts. For the middle group, you get the option. Do you want to opt out or not? It's going to depend on your situation. If you opt out, then what we're saying is, look, we are going to reduce your benefits, but in exchange, you get to start putting money into private accounts. So if you're 35, okay, you're going to give up some benefits, but you're going to more than make it up with the higher rate of return going forward. And then the older people, like me, you're going to remain on the current system. So do you see what I mean when I say privatization? Please understand, privatization does not mean you get to just get out of the Social Security system altogether. You have nothing to do with it. You're going to have to still pay some tax. Remember that picture I showed you with the new graduate holding his diploma, but he had money going in two directions, private accounts, but also to current Social Security recipients. Think of it as a trade-off, and that trade-off is probably going to make you better if the stock market performs well. If it does, you're going to be way better off. You're going to be way better off doing the private retirement, even if you have to still throw some money at today's retirees because of the pay-as-you-go system. Let's think about the impacts. So if you're less than 30 years old, as I just said, young people are going to be better off if they move to this private type of system. And that's going to be true even if they lose a few years of benefits, right? People are going to lose some benefits because if you started working right out of college, you started working at 22, you've accrued some benefits. So the trade-off is you give up those benefits. You give up those benefits. And in exchange, we will give you this new flexibility to privately save some of the money that we're taking out of your check. For the middle group, as we've said, your best strategy may depend on your age. The younger people in this age bracket, and again, I'm just making this up, the younger people may still want to move to the private because, again, if you're going to work for 35 more years, you're going to make it up easily. But if you're on the older side of this, the older people might want to stay on the current system, right? The closer you are to retirement, the less time you have to recoup the benefits with the higher rate of return in the stock market. And then finally, those people who are close to retirement, they don't want to change anything, right? So if you ask old people, if you start talking about changing Social Security, they get very nervous because they are going to be receiving these benefits soon. So here's the thing that you need to understand. Remember, we said that our goal here is to reduce that unfunded liability. Well, let's think about it. How do we reduce the unfunded liability, right? In 2023, that $78 trillion unfunded liability. Well, these two groups are where the savings is. Why are there savings? Because remember, the people on the left have to give up maybe 8 years of benefits they've accrued. So that reduces the unfunded liability. And we don't have to pay these people in the future. So that's going to reduce the unfunded liability, right? And then that middle group is really where a lot of action is. These are people who are saying, okay, I will take reduced benefits in exchange for having some of this money diverted into private retirement accounts. So these two categories, the left two columns, are where we're going to save. That's how we decrease the unfunded liability. It's going to be less money, but also, as the third bullet suggests, it's going to shorten the liability, right? There will be a point at which we don't owe anybody any Social Security benefits anymore. So this is going to be a really long phase in, right? But think about it. Those people who are less than 30 and working, let's say we do this today, if you're 22 and working, or 18 and working, whatever, eventually in several decades, we will not owe anybody Social Security benefits. This is a lot, right? It has to be done kind of over this long period of time, right? And you see that we can't treat everyone the same because that wouldn't be fair. There are some real benefits to privatization. We've talked about that the rate of return on Social Security is really low, right? That it barely meets inflation. You can do better in the private marketplace, right? And generally, even a conservative portfolio in the stock market. So if you think about a well-diversified portfolio that's not super risky, that's what I mean by a conservative portfolio. You can look at even a kind of a lower risk portfolio, and it's going to perform better than Social Security does. Second, you would have more control over your investments. You'd have more control over your investments. Remember, it's your money, so you want to control it. And you would have to. You would be managing these accounts. You would have to select your investments. Now, we can restrict you in certain ways if we think we need to, because again, this can still be a government program. And third, we've talked about Social Security is insecure. It is in your name. In this case, the money's not at risk, right? Your Social Security benefits, it's unclear you're going to have any, but if you are saving in a private account, it's in your name and it's not at risk. Now, it's risky if you don't make good investments, but it doesn't go away. It's there. The account is in your name. So there are some really big benefits of privatization. However, there are also concerns about privatization, and these are reasonable as well. One big concern about privatization is that, do people know how to manage their own money? Because if we move to privatization to some degree, you would have to be involved in managing your own money. Now, we could come up with ways where your money goes to, a choice of 10 things that are managed by other people. So we could probably work with this, right? But there are people that are concerned about it. Right now, if you are going to get Social Security for your retirement, you don't have to know how to manage your money for retirement. You're not saving privately. You're just relying on Social Security. Of course, if you're smart, you're not only relying on Social Security, but you know what I mean. The work is done for you. What if the money is used up too quickly upon retirement? Now think about it. Why is this an issue? Think how Social Security works. You are going to get a check till the day you die. You don't have to worry about running out of money. Another check is coming. Now, it may not be a very big check, but the checks keep coming. But if you are saving privately and you start drawing down on that money, you could run out at 80 but live till 90. So that is a real problem. A third issue is, how can we make things more fair? Remember, Social Security redistributes income to those people that are poor or low income, right? Those equations that define how Social Security calculates benefits takes money from high income people and moves it to lower income people. And we use that to make Social Security more fair. Again, it's all about economic equity. In Social Security, the people with lower incomes receive those higher rates of return to try to smooth it out. We can't redistribute income. It's in your private accounts. If it's in your private accounts, we can't take it away from you and say, oh, well, we need to help out people with lower income. That's not how it's going to work. Now, are there ways we might still be able to do this? Yeah, we could probably take money out of people's checks, move it around a little bit, then give it to you for it to be invested. So, okay, there's some workarounds there, but it's not going to maybe work as easily. The next question is, what about the non-working spouse? Remember, we've talked about that with Social Security, if you're a non-working spouse, so you're a stay-at-home wife or a stay-at-home husband, you still get Social Security benefits, and you get those Social Security benefits based on your husband's income. It's actually based on 50% of your husband's income. But if we move to some kind of private system, How do we handle the non-working spouse? I can't make you give that non-working spouse money out of your retirement account. So these things that we have built in to promote economic equity, they're not so easy when we move to this more privatized system. And then another great question is, what happens if the stock market tanks? And guys, you've seen this happen. I've seen it happen. So what if you are ready to retire and the stock market has tanked? Well, now you can't retire. You might need to wait till your account rebounds. That's a real issue because we can't guarantee you that you're going to have a great rate of return, right? We know that on average, rates of return are better in the market, but in any one year, we can't guarantee you that you have a good rate of return. So you can imagine that the concerns about privatization really scare people. And right now, we don't have any real proposals being considered. There are people that have put together proposals, but I don't believe that anything is really being taken seriously right now with respect to privatization, maybe just some small little things, but we haven't solved this problem. So quickly, to recap, make sure you understand that the nature of the pay-as-you-go system makes reform of Social Security really hard, right? And privatization's a really interesting idea. Hopefully you can understand why economists would say, look, there's some real potential promise in moving towards this privatization type of model. And of course, one big benefit, the goal is that we're reducing that unfunded liability. And if we can reduce that unfunded liability, it takes a lot of stress off of the Social Security system. But I want to say it again, and I want you to be clear that young people don't get to fully opt out. So when I said that you get kicked out and moved to the private system, you don't get to opt out in terms of paying your taxes. You will still have to pay some Social Security taxes because we have this unfunded liability that goes decades into the future, and you have to pay it. It's a pay-as-you-go model. But the idea is that people that are young like you will benefit from the investment in the private marketplace. That the trade-off is we're going to give you some flexibility. We're going to allow you to divert some of this money towards the private marketplace where the rate of return is higher. And guys, in the long run, a young person would be better off. Somebody like me, nope, I need to stay exactly where I am and accrue my benefits for the next decade or whatever, and then retire with the defined benefits that they've said I will get. But for you guys, this could be an interesting model. But again, not clear we've gotten anywhere in terms of conversations about doing anything like this. So it's more of an intellectual discussion, but not reality. Thanks for listening, guys. Let me know if you have any questions and have a great day.